Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got one of the most exciting guests we've had yet. This is a person that, quite frankly, is one of my hometown heroes. He is a man that I've always looked up to in the way that he does business, in the way that he heads his family, the way that he works for and supports our community. He's just one of the best and brightest we have here in Ponchatoula. So he needs very little introduction. Most of you probably already know Mike Fulmer. Mike, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Hello, Parker. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I know your time is limited between your family, your church, your projects, and of course, Berryland Motors, Berryland Campers, all your many business interests. So why don't, before we get into that stuff, we just kind of talk about how you got started and where you're from and who you are. So if you don't mind, just tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Parker, I grew up in New Roads, Louisiana. Went to high school at Falls River Academy, graduated there in 1979. And came to Southeastern. Actually came to Southeastern to play in the state championship basketball game. So I kind of found Southeastern and realized that's where I wanted to go to school through that championship.
Well, that's exciting timing because we had the state champs on the show last week. So
a lot of people come to watch the game and discover the university and discover him, and I was one of them many years ago.
Very cool.
And I went into business. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do as far as a career, but I wound up in marketing, and which was a very new business major back then. And I wound up getting a degree in marketing with a minor in business administration and a minor in finance, and graduated and quickly went to work in the car business. I spent my first 5 years at Durham Pontiac, working for Dick Durham, and then moved on to Baton Rouge and worked there for a few years and came back and worked at Dixie for Dan Durham. So I worked 17 years for other people, learning the business and learning the car business and working all different parts: salesman, sales manager, finance manager, general sales manager, new car manager, used car manager. I kind of worked the whole gamut in the industry, and I spent 17 years working for other people and really enjoyed that time learning the business.
Right. And of course, you learn from some of the best because the Durham family was so well regarded in this area. I know growing up, my dad always spoke about the Durham brothers, reverentially. They were really great business leaders. What were some of the things you learned when you worked for others? Because, I think a lot of people don't know that about you. Folks know they see the success you have today. They know your dad was a prominent doctor, perhaps, and maybe they just think it all fell in your lap when you were in your 20s. But you just said that's not what happened. You worked for a long time learning your industry. What are some of the lessons you picked up working at the Durham places and others?
Parker, I'm glad you noticed that, because a lot of people want to go into business immediately and have this idea or a concept. And I can tell you, I paid my dues in the car business. I learned the business in and out. I learned the banking industry, part of it, financing the automobiles, how they get repaired, how you get paid by manufacturer, working with people, hiring people, training people, managing them. I think that's one of the most important things I learned was how to hire good people and keep them there.
Right.
A lot of my staff has worked for me for many years, and I just hate losing somebody because you got to retrain all over again. So I kind of have a tendency to be more than fair with time off and more than fair with pay, and try to hang on to really good people, and they in turn give you really good work. And it's a two-way street. And I learned that in the car business early on, and I kept saying, well, if I ever go into business for myself, that's what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. And I kind of applied the things that I learned. I wound up about 22 years ago deciding to open up my own small used car lot.
Yeah.
Right next to Ponchatoula Feed and Seed, right in the heart of Ponchatoula.
Tell us about that. How did that idea take foot? And, what gave you that entrepreneurial seizure, if you will, to jump out on your own after nearly 2 decades working for others?
Well, at that point in time, I wanted to spend more time with my family, do a little fishing, do a little more hunting, take some time off. And I wanted a little bit more freedom. And by opening up what I thought was going to be a small used car lot, that was going to do that for me. So we bought a building, and actually, Buddy DuPont built it for me. And I hired 3 salespeople to come to work for me. And my office manager, Anita Garner, followed me from Dixie to come and help me open up. So I had really good help opening. And over the years, I had thousands of customers that bought cars from me through the years. And my customer base just followed me. I did a little advertising on the cable TV and on the radio. Of course, there was no internet back then. But my customers found me and came over and supported me. And the first month we opened, we were busy. The second month, we were busy. And it's been busy for 20-something years now.
It's been really fun to watch your business empire kind of grow and grow, because like you mentioned, you started, we shared the same landlord in the beginnings, I think, in Andrew Edwards.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think initially you rented from him. Eventually you clearly bought that space and more next to it. But, kind of similar here. I started out renting from the Edwards family as you did. Andy and I had a handshake month-to-month lease for 12 years before I was able to buy my own building. But, when you talk about your story, and I don't mean in any way to suggest that I've had the level of success you have, I have not. But when people look at me now, I'm about to hit my 20-year anniversary of law school graduate. And, I've been fortunate enough to be voted top attorney in the parish 6 years in a row. But nobody saw that grind the first 14 years when you're cutting your teeth and you're learning and you're maybe not making as much money as you want and you're working longer hours than you expect. So it's neat to hear someone of your stature tell that story and share that with our community. You mentioned hiring good people, keeping good people. And Mike DuPont, who you mentioned built your building, what a great example there. There's no better, finer fellow in Ponchatoula than Mike. But I've noticed it through people that I grew up with and care about, and folks I admire like Lawton Hotard, who was, again, one of my hometown heroes growing up, to one of my best friends of childhood, Brad Poche, who's worked for you for decades. I mean, Brad worked for you when your car lot was still a little car lot and your camper lot was even smaller. And now it's, he's one of your key guys at this big sprawling operation. Who have been some of the other people? You mentioned Anita. Can you tell us a little bit about your core team and the folks that have grown with you over the years?
Actually, I have to tell you the story with how Brad came to work for me, because it's so interesting. We were selling cars, and only cars off the lot, used cars at Berryland Motors. And one day we traded for a used motorhome. And I ran one ad in a local magazine, and I must have got 100 phone calls. I could have sold that one motorhome 50 times. Everybody wanted it. And we went to the Slidell Auto Auction the following week, and they were selling 2 travel trailers. I didn't know what they were worth. I didn't have an NADA book. I had no idea of the value of those units. So I just raised my hand and bought it. I was the highest bidder on it at the auction. And brought it back and cleaned it. And I paid a service technician who worked somewhere else to come and check it all out. They checked out fine and ran an ad, and I got another 100 phone calls. And I could have sold it 50 times. I said, this looks like something I need to look into.
Right.
So I went back to the same auction, bought another one, same thing happened again. And Brad Poche comes by and says, I see y'all look like you're starting to fool with a few RVs here, because he lives about 3 blocks away.
Right.
He said, the company I went to work for is no longer in business, and I've been in RV sales in the Baton Rouge area for quite a while. And he said, if you go into RVs, Mike, I'd like to work for you. See, Brad and I sold used cars together some 8 years earlier. I knew him very well. I knew his whole family, mom and dad and brothers. I knew them all.
Great family. We used to walk to St. Joseph together in the mornings. They lived across Memorial Park, and they would pick up the Layrisson boys there on 7th Street, and we'd all walk to school together. Great family.
Well, Brad says, what kind of pay plan can you work out for me? I said, well, Brad, I don't know. I've only had a couple of RVs and sold. I don't even have any in stock. He says, look, let's do this. I know where we can buy some. I'll go out. He was going to go out and purchase some. He'd put them on my floor plan. We'd get them in, clean them up, and service them and sell them, and we'll figure out a pay plan. I said, well, if you trust me, I worked for you for years. I trust you, so I trust you. So we shook hands on it, which there was no money discussion of what is fair.
Right.
And so he went out and bought a few RVs, and he would leave and go to Florida, tow a couple of them back, and I gave him a few dollars, and we started selling them and making a few dollars on them. And another guy, David Ferreira, came by to visit Brad, and he used to be in RV sales. While he was in the lot, there were too many customers for Brad to wait on, and David sold an RV while he was not working for me.
Great story.
So Brad says, hey, David used to be a salesperson. Will you pay him a commission on it? I said, sure, I'll be glad to pay him if he sold it. He did. So while he had to deliver it and show people how to use everything, he came back to deliver it and sold another one. He said, Brad had bought a bunch of units when David was selling them and Brad was buying them. And the following year, we sold more than 225 used RVs from behind the feed store in Ponchatoula, which is probably the worst location.
Yeah. So folks, if you're familiar with where my law office is, this is now Dr. Benson's parking lot across the street from his office. So it's catty corner. Like you said, Mike, you're not on Main Street. It's low visibility. And frankly, it wasn't fixed up. You fixed it up over the years when you were there.
We just put a little gravel on it, and a little to make sure it's built up.
Playing up the side. It seems like there's some nice crepe myrtles or something there and some nice pipe fencing around it. My point here, folks, is if you don't think it's nice now, it was certainly not better.
We started from scratch.
Great.
We just started from almost nothing.
That's a great story.
A manufacturer came by to visit with David Ferreira, and they were at Forest River, and they had the Cherokee franchise, and they offered me to be a Cherokee dealer, and I never even heard of a Cherokee. David had heard of them, Brad had heard of them, and I said, we'll give it a try and see how it goes. Well, the rep tells me now that he almost got fired because we didn't have a service department. We didn't have a place to park with about 10 units in stock. That his boss said, there's no way we could make it. And things started exploding. I knew I couldn't stay here. So I at that point in time, house was paid for, and most of my stuff in life was paid for. I had to mortgage everything and go out to the interstate and build what you see out there now. We're on
so
50 acres now.
Let's take a moment to pull that part out of the story, because I would love to hear, if you don't mind sharing it, how that conversation goes over with your wife. And of course, we're going to circle back, and I'm going to ask you tons about your beautiful, brilliant, wonderful wife and your daughters, and we'll dig deeper into family then. But I think a lot of us that are married, we dream of paying off our house one day and being in the type of position where you were. How's that go when you come home and say, honey, I'd like to, take all our chips, push them to the middle of the table, and go buy a bunch of trees out on the interstate for this business venture that's a little untested. How'd that go?
Well, to start off with, Sandra and I got married back in 1982. And she said, Mike, we can live anywhere you want, or you can have a business anywhere you want, as long as it's not but about 2 or 3 miles down the road from Mama's house. So I would commute to work. We had to live close by. We still do live within a few miles of her mother's. And so she was okay with me going into business. To start off with, she was very nervous. I guess anybody going into business, because you hear horror stories about 4 out of 5 businesses fail within the first 5 years, and not many people make it. And it's a struggle. And at first, I put in a lot of long hours and a lot of long time with it.
And how old were your children at that point? Were your girls born yet?
Yes, Cassidy was just born. When we started Berryland Motors, Cassidy might have been 6 months old.
Wow. So if you don't mind, let's go ahead and identify your family here for folks that don't know you quite as well. You mentioned you married your wife Sandra in 1982. You have 3 daughters. Why don't you tell us a little bit about each, and then we'll come back into this story.
Oldest daughter is Caitlin. Caitlin Skates. She's married to Robbie Skates. Robbie has Berryland Insurance, and they have 3 beautiful children. Our 3 grandchildren: Mason, Weston, and Roman. And we spend a lot of time with them. We've been enjoying them a lot. Callie has recently been married to Christian Boutwell, and she's living here, finishing school in graphic design and with a business degree. Caitlin's also finished the same. And Cassidy's our dancer. She went to New York, went to Marymount, and has come back home, graduated with honors from Marymount in New York City. And now she's teaching dance here. She came home. She was the first group that graduated without going on stage. She had to graduate on the internet because they couldn't take them back because COVID had just hit.
Oh, goodness.
She came home for 2 weeks to let COVID pass, and it's been 2 years now. But she's made this area her home so far, and she's
that's got to be so exciting for you to have them follow in Mama's footsteps and say, "Look, we can be anywhere in the world as long as we're a few miles from Mom."
Yeah. We love having them close by, especially with Christmas and all the times, Easter, the time we want to have them around the house. Just for we love having them around and spending a lot of time with taking trips and doing stuff.
Yeah. Well, they're brilliant. I've had the pleasure of working with the older 2 daughters, and they're brilliant and wonderful. And they, like you said, the 2 that have married really well, which is great. And it's got to be neat having that family around. So you were mentioning, Mike, that your baby girl Cassidy was pretty much a baby when you started this big venture out on the interstate. You know, your wife is understandably nervous. You know, what comes next? How did you go about developing? Because as I recall, that was kind of a a hidden jewel out there, right? I mean, it wasn't like you bought a lot that was ready to roll. You had to go build it out. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. We have a 9-year space between Caitlin and Callie. And when Caitlin was little, she thought her dad was the hardest working person she ever met because I was always working, doing something.
Right.
And then after we opened up on the interstate and the other girls start coming and visiting me at work, then they think they have the laziest dad around because he doesn't do a whole lot. You know, they weren't there when I went through paying my dues. But we bought some land out there on the interstate, I-12, and built the buildings that you see, brought in literally hundreds of thousands of loads of limestone. I started off with 15 employees, got on my knees and prayed. I needed 40 units a month to make payroll and make a few dollars. And the first month we had 42 sales.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was just a dream come true to hit that goal in the first 30 days of business. And, you know, one of the things that my marketing degree helped me with, you know, where do you locate this business that you're going to start? And I knew from other people how many cars passed on the interstate and how when you pull an RV, you don't want to take the back roads if you don't have to. You want to stay in the open. And I went out and counted 125 RVs that passed on I-12 where I'm located between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock on the Friday afternoon before Halloween that year. And I counted which ones were motorhomes, which ones were travel trailers and fifth wheels. And I kept saying, all my customers are riding right in front of me. I need to buy a piece of property with visibility and park the units out here. And that'll be my cheapest form of advertising. And it's about 50,000 people every day that go by and see Berryland's 500 units in stock. And it's still the best thing that I have. Is
that's a brilliant strategy. You know, I see it on a much smaller scale here. You know, it's probably no coincidence my office is located at this four-way stop, which coincidentally seems to have a lot of accidents. I've been in one myself there actually. But you're right. Let's, you know, what do they say about real estate? Location, location, location. But you were able to take that to the next level, not just have a place that's good for, you know, operating your business, but what's essentially the world's best billboard, right? Your product is right there, right, you know, across, you know, the divide from your consumers. So you mentioned month one, 42 sales, you needed 40. You avoided that kind of initial horror story cash crunch that many, you know, young businesses have. Did it just consistently grow from there? Did it blow up right away? Were there peaks and valleys? What was the growth of the business like?
It almost grew too fast, Parker. We were having to add on within 6 months of building. So I was taking the money we were making, putting it back in facilities and adding, I mean, everything was too small. We didn't have enough parts in the parts department, didn't have enough place to store things, didn't have enough service space. We immediately added 5 service space on top of the 4 that we had. Then we built new buildings and we've got, on the 50 acres out there now, I have, it changes with time, somewhere around 135 employees that work there, and most of which are the full breadwinners of their family. Mm-hmm. And so we've had some incredible months, incredible years, but some of those years, you know, when these hurricanes hit, RVs kind of become the answer to temporary housing until we can get our life back in order, get our homes tree off the house. And so during those hurricane times, we always keep, you know, so many units in stock. FEMA comes in and buys from us, and people come in and buy with Katrina and all the hurricanes, especially Ida recently. And you know, we can sell sometimes 250, 200 to 300 in 1 month. Wow. It's been kind of crazy hard to keep up with because they all need servicing, repairs, and then when you have an RV. It's like it is a house on wheels. So it has bathrooms and plumbing and air conditioning, refrigeration. When you take it down the highway, an earthquake happens and a hurricane happens to the RV because you're shaking like an earthquake and you're driving 75 miles an hour and you're in a hurricane. So they need service, they break. And
I bet.
So service has been a large part of our business, keeping the right parts, the right people, being able to repair them. They keep changing. All these electronics keep changing. Keeping a staff that can work on them has been a challenge. I've got some really good people. I personally don't know much about working on an RV, but I got some great people. Chad Savona and Lloyd Lejeune have been with me for many years as service managers
Yeah, great guys.
Yes, and they are great guys. And I tell people all the time, if you can break it, they can fix it.
Well, and I've noticed over the years, I obviously you were one of my first clients when I came to town, and we're not going to breach any attorney-client confidentiality here, but I know you won't mind me sharing that I noticed when I represented you that you would go above and beyond for your customers what you were legally obligated to do for them. They may contract you to fix this, and you do it, and then you would, constantly be doing much more than you legally were obligated to. Can you talk about, is that truly one of your kind of strategies for business? Is it the
It
customer
is.
satisfaction thing? And where does that come from? Because it seems to be a very expensive value, but I always admired that you kind of honored it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you might not want me to say this, Parker, but I'm going to say it anyway. when I worked for other people, and I worked for the Durhams and worked in Baton Rouge, we were sometimes involved in lawsuits, and it drug out for years. It got very expensive. It cost both sides a lot of money. The customer was never satisfied. It always ended up bad. And even when we win the lawsuit, we would always come out behind because the customer didn't like it, wouldn't recommend us.
Right. So, word of mouth would go bad, probably.
Yeah, it would go bad. So it wasn't worth winning or losing.
Yeah.
So when I opened up my lot, I kept saying, well, I'm going to try to treat somebody the same, go above and beyond and maybe avoid the lawsuits, And I can tell you, we sell 30 to 50.
Hey, that's a good point. That's why you didn't make such a great client for me. You didn't get sued enough. I had to pick a whole new practice area because nobody would sue Berryland.
Yeah, we had we sell 30 to 50 used cars a month, every month for the last 24 years. Wow. And I can tell you to this day, I've never been sued by a customer on a used car.
That's amazing.
Now these cars break sometimes. They're like kids. They don't listen all the time. Okay, sometimes the cars break. And when they break, that's what divides the men from the boys. When you're selling cars, if you fix it, take care of your customer, and do the right thing, instead of the customer mad at you and getting an attorney and suing you, and you coming out from behind, if you step up and spend the money, it's cheaper than paying the attorneys, and the customer's so happy they send you somebody.
Yeah.
And it's a win-win deal. And I've had to hire attorneys to represent myself. Selling these new products that we sell, the RVs, we don't build them. The manufacturer does, and sometimes we get involved in lawsuits with, the manufacturer has to get involved in it because it's got so many components to them. But with the cars, we just stand behind what we sell and go above and beyond and take care of people. And it just seems to always work out, and the customers know we're trying. And I don't know. People send me so many people, I could never manage it another way. It's just the best way to do business.
Well, I'm sensing a common thread here in the way you approach business, and correct me if I'm mistaken, but the kind of same value that we're talking about here with regards to treating your customers right and taking out of your pocket to fix things and pay people to fix things, it's also very similar to what you do with employees. You mentioned earlier, you and Brad just kind of said, hey, let's do business, didn't even talk numbers. And here we are. He's still with you 20 something years later. Clearly done very well for himself. He's got that big old house back in Timber Creek. What's your theory on kind of taking care of employees and compensation? Because you seem to be very generous on that front too.
It's funny you mentioned that, Parker. Occasionally Southeastern will ask me to come in and speak in one of the marketing classes as a business owner that's been out here for 20 years plus on the interstate. And I was talking with Dr. Miller, who used to be the head of the department and dean of business. And I said, Doc, I don't follow the things you teach in business. So I don't really feel comfortable to come out here and tell you what's helped us be successful and what I've done, because I feel like that I'm not really doing the right thing. Because when I read the books on business, it'll tell you for every dollar you give your employees, that's a dollar you don't have as a businessman.
Right.
So if you're paying somebody $50,000 a year and you can hire somebody to work for $40,000 a year, you're supposed to fire the person at 50 and hire the guy at 40. And that's one way to do it. And that's, it's this business. It's business. You can get away with it. I've never wanted to do that. I've always wanted to hire good people, give them a good job, motivate them, train them, give them some time off to be with their families. And they wouldn't leave you over nothing, pay them well, and keep them. And it would come back to you in returns. You would have a good employee, so they would stay with you for a long time. So sometimes I overpay somebody, meaning I say overpay. In my eyes, it's not, but maybe I could get somebody to do the job for less. But this person's got 15, 20 years experience with me. Why do I want to hire a greenfee who might only stay for 6 months until he gets a better offer? So I stayed with my employees. My employees have stayed with me. You know, when they have things in their life, when their parents get sick, I give them time off to be with their parents. When their kids are sick, they take time. You know, and they don't leave you when it becomes like just because they got somebody offering a few dollars more. Or
just because a new guy opens up the street and wants to poach your best guys, you get some loyalty then.
That's right.
Probably.
When the COVID money came out, all of my employees came back to work the next week. Nobody stayed home and collected. These include people on the washing crew. These are people doing low maintenance jobs, and they all came back to go to work. And that tells you that I appreciate that, and I take good care of them. I never, you know, I'm kind of funny. The business book tells you if your employee's working for you and you don't need them that day, send them home. That way you don't have to pay them 30 hours instead of 40 hours. And I don't do that. I let all my employees that work hourly, they get 40 hours a week, no matter if we're busy or not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you seem to get the basic premise that it's a relationship, right? And it's give and take. And because you give to them when they need it, they're there for you when you do. I want to share here with you because people are taking notice of your generosity in the community. Chef Matias Rojo, who of course was a great guest here on the show just a few weeks ago, he comments here, Mike. He says that you have inspired him immensely. He says that you are the most generous man that they know and that they strive to be like you. So, Matias, thank you for tuning in. You and Rachel were wonderful guests. And what's the old saying? It takes one to know one. You know, you two are certainly generous in your own right. We have other comments here. Mandy Braywick says that she loves the Fulmer family. She, of course, is another great former guest of the show. And she says that Joseph says to tell Weston's, say hello to Weston's pawpaw. So your grandchild must be in school with Joseph, it sounds like.
Yes, Joseph.
Speaking of grandkids, you mentioned them. Mason, your little granddaughter, such a sweetheart. My law firm has a Bikes for Kids program, and it targets kids who do good things in school, churches, communities. And, you know, she was nominated because she's so kind to others, especially little kids that are maybe being picked on or not treated that kindly. And she's just a great young woman. It was neat to meet her through the Bikes for Kids program. And then coincidentally, they were at a birthday party with us. I got to chat with her there too. Just Robbie and Caitlin are doing a great job with her and all the other kids. Great little family. Speaking of kids and your family, Mike, if you don't mind, I'd like to switch gears here a little bit and take a big swing back to where we started this interview. You mentioned that you grew up in New Roads. And, you know, you went to school out there and didn't come to this area until college. I know that you're we're very close with your father growing up. He was a well-respected doctor. Tell us, if you don't mind, a little bit about what your childhood was like, you know, what your parents were like. And then eventually we'll get into kind of how New Roads differs from Ponchatoula and just kind of talk about the communities. But why don't we start with the household? Tell us about what childhood was like at the Fulmer house.
Well, my dad practiced medicine in New Roads for 35 years. But before he practiced medicine, he always wanted to graduate in agriculture and own a dairy. At that time, the dairy business was terrible. So when he was in college, he switched his major over to medicine. And he figured one day he'd make enough money to buy his own farm.
Oh, wow.
So he was successful in business and also practicing medicine. And he was able to purchase 200 acres of land. We grew up in a small house until I was maybe a junior in high school. And we moved out to 200 acres of land where he had 75 head of cattle. So I grew up baling hay and working the farm, and which also involved hunting. And we were on the banks of Falls River. We were able to fish and ski and do a lot of boating. The family was really close. We all went to church every Sunday and Sunday night and Wednesday night usually.
Oh, wow.
So we had really good times, really close. We had at Falls River Academy, we had a pretty good sports program there, and we had won either state or made the state finals every year in basketball, and baseball we did pretty well. So I played a lot of sports.
What positions did you play? Tell us about that.
In basketball?
Yeah, both. Yeah, let's start there since you were state champ in basketball.
Well, I was on a team that was state champ, but I'm the guy that the following year missed a free throw, shot an air ball with 2 seconds left, when we were 1 point down. So I've been on both ends of it. But we had a really aggressive team, very short, fast, press, full court press, a lot of steals, and we trained well. I could jump up and hang on a basketball rim, but I was only 5'10". So,
wow.
So they kept us in really good shape, and we played hard.
So in case any of your grandkids are watching, you know, Pawpaw and Mike had hops back in the day.
Back in the day, you can't anymore though. That's ancient history. But it was small town. New Roads is still a small town.
Yeah.
You know, farming community. It's laid back. It's a great place to grow up. It kind of reminds me of Ponchatoula, but Ponchatoula's growing faster.
Right.
Than New Roads is, you know.
Yeah, New Roads is beautiful. I mean, that great Oxbow Lake there at False River, you know, it's just a wonderful. My mom's from nearby Livonia, so we spent a lot of time in that neck of the woods over the years, and it's pretty. But you're right, being off the interstate, you know, off of this I-12, I-10 corridor, it doesn't see the growth rate we have here.
Right.
You're getting some love here from family. Caitlin says she's so proud of you, Dad, and she loves you. Miss Janice Gibbs is on here to say that she doesn't know you, but she can tell that your heart is in the right place and you are a great businessman. It says here that Nancy Duvick says that you are her daughter's basketball coach at the age of 5. Do you remember that season, Coach Mike?
I do. I coached girls basketball city league for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I coached it a lot. And
we have that in common. You probably were much better at it than I because you were a real player. But I coached years ago. And this year, you know, my son, who was 5 when the season started, had his first year. So I recruited my pal Marshall Graves to come because I figured the boys needed a real coach who needed basketball. But the neat thing about that age group is that they don't keep score. So when the season concluded last weekend, I gave all our boys rings and, you know, because we were technically undefeated. But, wow, 15 years there. That's not – I always said, and tell me if you agree, youth sports, it brings out the best in kids and the worst in parents because I'm amazed at some of the things you hear in the stands. But the kids
are so easy. The kids are so easy, but the parents are so hard. You're absolutely right. But even today, I walked and hadn't coached basketball in probably 15 years, but I walk around Ponchatoula and I hear somebody say, Coach Mike.
Well,
Coach Mike, you know.
You got somebody here saying that. You know, Mandy says that y'all won the championship when you coached her and Caitlin, and she says that you were a great basketball coach. Mark Verboy, speaking of basketball coaches, he's now coaching freshman boys basketball at PHS. He says you've been a huge asset to the community and that you exude kindness and integrity. And Rose Dominguez, our school board member here, has chimed in. She wants to ask a question. How many teachers' cars have you washed for Teacher Appreciation Week over the years? She says it's probably too many to count and that she and the folks in the school system really appreciate all you do. So let's talk about that, if you don't mind. Because
do you know about that part?
No, that's why I want to ask, because I know you're such a giver to the community. Tell us about this project, and then I'd love to hear more about just kind of your viewpoint on helping the community.
I've learned in business, when you give, you get back a lot. And giving with a smile, it's so underrated. It's such a small community. People talk about things. One day, it was Teacher Appreciation Week. I went by St. Joseph School to do something. I looked around, all the cars were dirty because it was pollen on just dirty cars. And I have a crew that comes by and washes our lot all the time, and they bring their own water in a truck. And I asked them what they would charge me to go to St. Joseph and wash these 25 cars. And he told me what he charged. He went out there, and I got permission from the teachers to wash the cars. And we washed them, and the newspaper came out and wrote a little article on them.
Oh, that's cool.
Then I got like 25, thank you letters from everybody, from the priest to the ladies in the cafeteria.
Right.
And I said, boy, this is awesome. I need to do this instead of advertising on the radio or whatever.
Yeah.
So I asked if I could go to Perrin. I went over and talked to the principal. She said, you want to do what? So I'm going to come here while the teachers are in school. We're going to give a piece of paper to put on the dashboard of their car that says, wash me. And we're going to wash the cars. We're going to spot-free rinse them and scrub them down. We're not going to go inside the car. And we washed the 100 cars there, and I got 60 or 70 more thank you letters.
Oh, wow.
I said, I got to keep doing this. So we washed every teacher in the Ponchatoula School District, all the way out to Champ Cooper, Ponchatoula High, Junior High, Tucker.
Yeah.
We just kept going from school to school to school. And the teachers, I had a whole board, a wall full of thank you cards. and then people were talking about us, and it's just, I told somebody I did it as a gift, and then it kept coming back to me and kept coming back.
Yeah.
And I realized, when you do things in the right frame of mind, you give a gift expecting nothing. Sometimes those are the greatest gifts because they come back, and then they come back and you can give more.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. And you can kind of parlay that into, something bigger, a bigger project. That's really neat. And, it makes me think of the thank you notes I get for these little bikes. Sometimes the kids get creative and they'll like draw you a poster. We have one framed in our conference room here at the other end of the room you're in, and it just makes your heart melt. Right. I mean, I would pay for 100 bikes for the feeling I had when little Eli wrote me his, thank you poster. And I'm sure you feel like that with these teachers. And I mean, people here years later, talking about it. Rose commenting again here, what a great gift it was. It's amazing. That's really neat. It's no coincidence that kind of wherever you go, people are commenting on that. I mean, when Coach Trish Landesh was on the show a week ago, we weren't even talking about Berryland or your business or you in any way, but it came up, right? I mean, we're talking, just when we talk about the scholarship that she has, and this is, I should restate this, when she was interviewed a year ago, not the last week with the team, but she brought up about how generous you are to give spots for this, for the scholarship she has in her daughter's memory. I mean, it just seems like you guys are constantly giving. And it's great to hear that you get back rewards in various ways for that, because you certainly have been very generous. Let me ask you this. Clearly you mentioned your dad was a business success, a great man in the community. They raised you in the church. Who have been some of the mentors or guiding lights in your life that when you look back and think about your own success and the walk you've had, that you feel like, this is somebody I learned from. This is somebody I admire. This is somebody who taught me how to be how I am and who I am?
Well, I've got quite a few people that I worked with over the years that as you get to know them, you start seeing people that actually put their faith to work in their business and put their faith to work in their life in all sorts of ways. And working for people that sometimes when you work for companies for a while, you find somebody that you learn what not to do. Right?
Exactly. Right.
I hate to say it like that, but sometimes I see and go, boy, I don't ever want to be like that guy, or I ever want to be like this guy, or I want to be more like someone else that's working with the Durhams was really good.
That's a great point.
When I worked for Dan Durham, he always wanted to satisfy the customer and make sure that they were taken care of and they were happy. I've watched him do what I thought was crazy. Somebody would buy a car and I knew there was nothing really wrong with the car. They didn't really like it. And a month later he'd buy it back from them. I'm like, what are you doing? And he remained friends with them. They turned back around and buy another one from him. And I just saw some of the things that he did that was, when you're in business, you're kind of free to do what you want. He could have won any lawsuit. He was going to get sued, but he wasn't worried about it. He was more interested in making friends and doing things the right way. And, people, when you're in business, sometimes you hear business is business. You fire your best friend, cut his pay. Business is business. Business is not business. Business is part of your life. And your faith and your life and your morals has to extend over to how you run your business.
Right.
And it's kind of the slower pace of success. It's not an instant success strategy, but in the long run, it wins. And getting involved in church, I grew up Catholic. I grew up Baptist and converted to the Catholic Church here in Ponchatoula at St. Joseph, 1982. And I love my Baptist faith. I was introduced to Jesus Christ through the Baptist Church. I learned the Bible and studied the Word of God. And when I came to Ponchatoula, Sandra was Catholic and had an opportunity to learn a little more and learn about the Catholic faith. I thought I knew all about it. I found out I really didn't. Once I learned about being Catholic, I dove in and met some really nice priests over the years that kind of guided me on what to study and what to learn. And then the internet came out, which is something that really makes it nice because whatever you want to know, you can pretty much Google it and study and find the truth and get your questions answered without having to go sit in classrooms for years to study. So I was able to share what I've learned with other people, and still do that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I was blessed to be able to witness your fourth cup presentation at church, and it was insightful. It was just, it was so wonderful in so many ways. Tell us about what went into that and what, inspired you to not only learn about your faith, but to share it with others and to lecture and present in that way.
Real quick, I'll tell you how it got started. When Mel Gibson filmed the movie The Passion of the Christ, it was playing in the theaters in the Hammond area, and I went to go buy the tickets to take my family to the movie, and I couldn't buy just 8 or 10 tickets for my family and friends, and they said you have to buy the whole theater. That's where they're selling it. The churches in the area were buying the whole theater, so I couldn't. I didn't know any churches were buying it. It wasn't St. Joseph, so I went there 2 or 3 times. I couldn't buy just the tickets that I needed, so I asked, well, how many seats are in the theater? They said 215. So I pulled my credit card out and bought all 215 seats. I went back to work, got on the loudspeaker and paged and told everyone I had tickets to see the movie The Passion of Christ. If they wanted to see it, come to see me and I'll get tickets for them. And I saved out about 30 tickets for my wife and some friends, and all went out to the theater and watched that movie. And as a family, I knew everybody in the theater or their spouse was with them. And while I was watching the movie, I kind of had a little something that I saw, just a little twinkle that I saw. And I spent the next 6 months studying and learning, trying to find out what it was. And from that point on, I started sharing a little bit. And when I shared it with the priest, he said, Mike, God didn't give you this for you to keep quiet. He gave you this for you to share this with other people. And I kind of thought, well, who am I to step up and share this, And I have a presentation next Wednesday in Pierre Park. I give these presentations for around the last 16, 17 years. It'll be the 245th time I've shared that same presentation that you saw. I still share it today. I have a few other presentations that I give. And
so how do you organize that? I mean, when you're talking about, hundreds of presentations, do you have a schedule? Do you know going into the year, I'm going to do this 25 times or whatever? Or do you just kind of go by when you're asked? I mean, it sounds like you're kind of an itinerant preacher of sorts in a way. So,
yeah.
How's that organized in a life that's so busy with a large family, multiple businesses, et cetera?
Well, they've been very patient with me because many times I've left functions that they've had to go to, an invitation to go out to Baton Rouge or Lafayette. Recently was in Campton, which is just north of Lafayette. We actually ate the Lord's Supper, ate the Passover meal, and we learned how the Passover becomes the Feast of the Eucharist, how the Old Covenant, right. Passover becomes the New Covenant. And I've studied for thousands of hours on it, and if people ask me, I'll give the presentation anytime I'm asked. I can fit in my schedule, mostly through Facebook or messaging. They'll contact me and just ask me when they'll have another presentation coming up, or would I be open to giving one soon, and we'll set it up at St. Joseph, or we'll set it up in somebody's house. I've given it to as many as 300 people at one time, and many times I've given it to just 2 people. The whole presentation is about an hour and 45 minutes. I share it with just 2 people.
Wow.
I feel like, whoever wants to hear it, I have an obligation to share what I know. If it's something that can impact their life, I need to make sure that I share it as many times as possible. So
that's powerful. Well, let me ask you about because what's interesting to me about growing up Baptist and now being Catholic all this time is it's essentially the reverse of my experience. Although I have not become a Baptist, I've spent the last 10 years in Baptist pews, having married my beautiful wife and gone to church with her so many times. And I've been really grateful for that transition because I've learned so much about how these two faiths or 2 arms of the Christian faith, have differences. And, I just find that it constantly has helped me to know, grow up in, say, Catholic school to learn one thing, and then say the Baptist perspective on the Bible, which you mentioned growing up, what's your kind of take on that? Because I feel like we're living at a really neat time in Ponchatoula specifically, where Baptists and Catholics seem to be cooperating more For example, I know that Pastor Cranford and Father are meeting consistently, publicly with their congregations to move forward as Christian brothers and sisters. And that's such a stark contrast to say the church my parents grew up in, where they were told that folks in the other faith were going to hell and all this stuff. What's your kind of read on that, having had one foot planted firmly in each faith, over the course of your life?
Well, you can choose to look at it two different ways. You can choose to look at it and see the differences that we have or the things that we share in common. And in watching our world today and seeing, Christians who are we're worshiping the same God, and we need to actually understand each other as being on the same team.
Right.
The Baptists are not our enemy. The Methodists is not our enemy. We have one enemy, Satan. And Satan's trying to pull us all apart. So as Christians, we stand together on the things that we do believe, and those things are powerful. We have so many common beliefs that Jesus was born of a virgin, that he's the Son of God, that he's died for our sins. You start going through what we actually believe, you're going to see, wow, we believe a lot of things that are exactly the same. And we worship maybe in a little bit different way, but we're still working for the same goal, is to get to heaven.
Right.
And I respect when people have a faith that they practice. One of the worst things I can imagine is somebody say, yeah, I believe in God, but I don't really worship it anyway. I don't like churches. And I'm kind of like, come on, man, look at the Ten Commandments. God says, to keep the Sabbath day holy, which means to worship him. And the Bible's filled with examples like that. And I think Dr. Cranford said it best when he said that Jesus gave us the high priestly prayer in the upper room. It's in the Gospel of John. When he prayed that we would all be one. And that's what we're working towards, is to all be one body in Christ.
Yeah.
And like I said, we have a common enemy. It's not each other, it's Satan.
Yeah.
We have to stick together as Christians. So
well
many things
said.
that will pull us apart on right now. We see all the lies on Facebook and the lies that's going on the internet. And we don't know what to believe about the vaccine, or take it or don't take it. And we just don't know what the truth is anymore.
Yeah.
And the truth, Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. The truth is Christ. And we need to focus on that, because there's so many things that can steer us away from it. And I try to keep that focus as much as possible.
That's a wonderful perspective. And I want to add to it here what our dear friend Marshall Graves, who himself is a preacher, another great former guest on our show. He says here that Satan is the author of confusion, and his goal is to divide and conquer. Pretty much exactly what you said there, Mike. So that's a good example of Baptist Marshall Graves and Catholic Mike Fulmer agreeing. So the priests and the preachers are what they're doing and getting together seems to be working here in Ponchatoula. Let's talk about an aspect of your faith.
Can I interrupt you one second?
No, please do. It's your show. Go for it.
And along that same lines, we have a faith sharing that's going to take place at the Baptist Church here in Ponchatoula this Sunday night coming up at 6:00. And this is where we're going to get together and we'll have from people from all different faiths, not just Catholics and Baptists, getting together and sharing testimonies. Meaning kind of like I'm doing right now. I'm telling you a little bit about my life. Well, these are people in the community that are going to share their testimony, maybe how they found God, or what was important in their life, maybe something that happened in their life where they saw God or felt God's presence and something that changed their life. And we do this periodically. We've had a few at the Catholic Church, and this will be the first one at the Baptist Church. But I want to welcome people to come out to it, see what it's about. No one's trying to, we don't sit there and discuss theology between two different churches to try to read the Bible and say, you said it means this, I said it means that. We don't get into that. We just talk about what Jesus means to me and some things about how he changed my life. And we have some really good speakers that are going to be there this week.
Thank you for sharing that. Did you say that's 6:00 this Sunday at First Baptist Church?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, right there on Pine Street in Ponchatoula?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you mentioning that. So it's, this is Christianity's family tree coming together here, right?
Absolutely.
I like that you make clear that nobody's trying to do any converting there, right? Just family reunions. You're going to go home and sleep in your house, but you'll be better for spending that day with your Christian brother or sister and hearing their perspective. So let's talk about something that at least has spun off from your Christian faith and your involvement in the church, and it's related to it. And that is this wonderful retreat center that you have acquired in Mississippi that I know means a lot to any Catholic kid that was educated in the 80s and beyond, because we often took field trips there from St. Joseph. Tell us about that project. This is really exciting up at Chattawa.
Well, growing up, I went to church camp every summer, and we sometimes would go into the hills, and we had canoeing and archery. We would study scripture at night and learn a lot about our faith. And as we succeeded in business, my wife and I wanted to give back something, and we decided. I was on the board at Rosaryville for many years, and I watched Rosaryville do some great things and do some not so great things, but they wound up closing. Yeah. And we discussed about how important it would be to have a retreat center for the Baton Rouge Diocese, where people could come out and hear God's call, find Christ. Maybe, we're short on priests. We don't have the vocations that we used to have. And it's rightfully so, because we don't have places where people can go and hear in the quietness God speaking to them. And we found out through Charlene Daniels and my nephew Logan, who sells real estate for her, who was on the show recently, that St. Mary the Pines in Chattawa, Mississippi was up for sale. And we had no idea it was so affordable. But this is a 150-year-old monastery that they rent an all-girls school and a retreat center out of for many, many years. And it's on 400 acres of land. And the place is huge. It has like 110,000 square feet of building space. And the School Sisters of Notre Dame ran it, but they were aging. They kind of almost completely closed it for the last 30 years. All they're doing is maintenance on the buildings. And they put it on the market to move out and go to, they had like 8 or 9 facilities nationwide. They were just going to consolidate and go to another place. And when they put it up for sale, it's a steal. I mean, you could never build these buildings brand new ever. And they're all kept up very well maintenance-wise. So we were able to help acquire it with the leadership of Father Mark Beard, who is the pastor, the priest at St. Helena in Amy. He and I went up there and met with a few other people. Architect Josh Hoffpower came up and looked at the construction of the building. He's on our board. And we quickly purchased it and opened up a retreat center that's hitting in full swing, just in time for COVID to shut it down.
Oh, wow.
But we've been keeping it open. COVID has been a struggle for us, because anytime you have large gatherings, it's kind of been a struggle.
Sure.
But we've been, this weekend there's going to be 70 people from St. George Parish in Baton Rouge that are coming in for a retreat. We have, it used to be an all-girls school, so we have a full cafeteria, a commercial cafeteria. We can feed 120 people at a time. We got lots of bed space, like 180 beds. It's got an old gymnasium that looks like it came straight out of the Hoosier movie. It's just
That's great. Marshall, I hope you're still watching. You hear that? Great old gym. I know that'll pull the Graves gang up there. And you mentioned Charlene and Logan, who of course worked together at Branch Real Estate. Charlene actually went to school up there years ago. She did. And they said, girls rather came from all over the world to attend the school there. I know my mom has gone down to, say, El Salvador or just to visit friends with Charlene that Charlene met at Chattawa. So that's so neat that you have this family connection through Logan and his profession as a realtor to somebody like Charlene, who knows the history of that place and actually lived it. So that's so cool. And look, Graves is still watching. So he says he is interested. Maybe you guys.
It's not far. It's only 3 miles into Mississippi.
Yeah. So, okay. So you cross over the Mississippi line going up 55, right?
Right.
And just 3 miles into the state you're there.
It's at the Chattawa exit.
Yeah.
Now there's nothing in Chattawa. When you get off the exit, there's nothing there. Chattawa is the retreat center, which is a couple miles off the interstate. The Redemptorist priests back in the 1850s were riding a train to Memphis, and the train broke down right there. And they crossed the Tangipahoa River and found the land where they located and purchased it and built a monastery there, and later sold it to the School Sisters of Notre Dame. It's an incredible place. Charlene told us quite a few stories about it. They brought in teachers from Tulane that would come in on the weekends
Mm-hmm.
and teach, because the boarding school, the kids were there all week and stayed there. So these teachers were working on the weekends. They paid them a lot of money to come in. So this high school students were getting college professors to come in from Tulane to work in the summertime and to work in the weekends. And they had, at one time, this was one of the highest valued educations you could get in the whole entire state of Mississippi.
Oh yeah, I
And
bet.
people came in, like you said, from South America and
Yeah.
all over the world.
And
to
these are
get their
well-to-do
kids.
families, you know. I mean, these are, you know, very, very, you know, well-off families that are sending their kids halfway across the world to go there. Now, Caitlin has chimed in here, say, Dad, don't forget about the Christmas tree farm. So tell us about Timber Hill. What's up with that?
Oh wow, she went up there and cut her Christmas tree, and met the people that had the Christmas tree farm just north of it, and brought one back to put in her house.
Very cool.
Yeah, but you know, I did that when she was a kid, but you know, when the needles started falling and I had to clean it all up, and it got easier to put one in the attic every year. That kind of went to artificial way, but they've got some really old-fashioned things that they do up there.
My wife has put me on notice that I will never have the natural Christmas trees I grew up with in her house. We are a plastic only family at this point. Well, I want to thank you and Miss Sandra for doing that for our Christian community, for our diocese and the, you know, surrounding area, because like you said, with the decline of the priesthood and the, you know, the sisterhood with nuns, you know, these institutions like Rosaryville, like Chattawa in its old form, they just are not able to be kept up, right? So if we don't have people like you that have been blessed in the private sector with the means to step up and do something like this, I mean, who knows what would have happened there, you know?
It's been a dream for us. I wanted to try to do something that can make a difference. You know, I wanted to say, what can I do that can help someone else find God or help somebody else in good ways? And Father Mark was such an inspiration. I've been to Medjugorje with him twice, and I know him very well. But some of the things that, you know, like for instance, we put a summer camp in. I went to summer camp as a kid, and I know how much it meant to me. And last year we put together Camp Chattawa, and we had quite a few people come in and help manage and run the camp. And we had like 200 kids that came in between 3rd and 8th grade. It's an overnight camp where they would spend the night, and they stayed like for 5 nights. And they played games, they sang songs, they went swimming, they went canoeing.
Hey, you got me smiling now. You've got me thinking of my childhood camps. I went to a place in Mississippi called Strong River, and they would do the canoe trip, and even did an overnight canoe trip. And we've talked on this show extensively about the concept of camping with Sparky Wells. You know, his family had Ponchatoula Beach, and even independent of Ponchatoula Beach, Sparky and his wife Kathy worked in that industry in their youth. And it's such a special thing to give to kids, that opportunity to find wilderness and kind of do their thing in the woods. I mean, you've spent a lifetime fishing, hunting, swimming. You know, you mentioned earlier. And so it's so cool that you're able to share that with others who maybe don't have the means to do the kind of things you did growing up, or your girls did.
It's just what you're saying. You know, in the afternoons, the deer come out to the deer feeders because they're mostly tame when nobody hunts them on the grounds. And they've got a nice.
Hey, folks, that's the only Fulmer property where the critters don't get shot, so they probably appreciate that.
We don't shoot things in our yard. When we hunt, we go out where the wild are. But we set the dates for the kids camp again this year. It's called Camp Chattawa.
Okay.
You can find it on the website. It's going to be June the 12th.
Caitlin, if you're still watching, maybe if you could put a link here, we'd appreciate that. And if not, no worries. Somebody will.
Okay, the first session is June the 12th to the 17th. The last session is June the 26th to July the 1st. And those are the dates for Camp Chattawa. It's filling up fast. That's been so popular.
That's so great. And like you say, it's just 3 miles across the line. Mike, you've been a great guest. I've enjoyed this. I could do another hour, easy peasy, but I promised you I'd get you out of here around 6.
Is it that time already?
We're almost there. Yeah, we're right there. Is there anything else on your mind, on your heart, just anything you'd like to share with our viewers about yourself, or anything else we've talked about, or anything? And by the way, while I'm asking that, Caitlin mentions here that scholarships are available too to camp. So folks, know that. But anything else, Mike, you'd like to talk about at all?
Well, I want to thank you for having me on the show, and I hope I can live up to the introduction that you gave me. I still, I work on it every day, trying to do things the right way. And we've had so much stress in our lives with the hurricanes, with COVID, and I always encourage people to go back to their faith, back to their families, back to their roots, and stick together and help each other out. We've been through a lot. Our community's been through a lot, and our world is going. Now we're facing with unbelievable gas prices and war and a threat of nuclear war. So we all need to be faithful in whatever way we worship God, and to be strong in our faith and try to help each other out as much as possible.
Amen. And folks, we're going to conclude with a message from Miss Ann Phillips, Miss Ann, I love you. You're great. She says, Mike is great. And I couldn't agree more. And so we'll end it there. So Mike, thank you once again for being on the show. To our viewers, thank you for sticking in to the end. We will see you next week. Take care.
Thank you for having me, Parker.